All right, we're going to get started. I'm Matt Pitts. Brett Caldwell is in Puerto Rico. I'm here with Rick Hale. Rick, say hello.
Hello.
All right, we're going to jump right in. Florida stats here. So, wanted to start off today. There's obviously a lot of noise in the market, headlines, opportunities, opinions, uncertainty. And what we do here is we actually step back and look at what's happening and can really you're going to get a good idea, I think, that the market's not broken. It's more of a separating market. And in markets like this, agents who win aren't just the busiest, they're the clearest, the most trusted, and the ones who step up. And that's why you're here today is get a real good grasp of the data and what's going on in the market stories so we can become that trusted source of information. All right, so we're going to start out with Broward County single family homes. I opened it up the last 10 weeks. Thanks to Luke for getting all this information updated for us. We had 851 active listings on the market, 211 went under contract with 153 pending and 278 closed. If you look at the last 2 weeks, it's actually some of the strongest under contract weeks we've had in the last 2 months put together. So, really good numbers there. Canceled, expireds, 78 and 9. Pretty common. I'm going to go on down to the condos in Broward as I can. And I'm scrolling. There we go. All right, condos. We had 1,000 more hit the market last week. We have 138 of those go under contract. Strongest numbers since March 30th. Pending as well, 123. Closed 209. 209 is the largest closing number we've had in 10 weeks that it's shown. And I would guess if I open that up further, it would be the largest, one of the largest this year. Luke, correct me if I'm wrong. Expired withdrawn about 300. So that's Broward County. Rick, any input on Broward?
Steady Freddy. I mean, if anything, I see improvement. So,
Love it.
yeah.
Love it. All right, we're going to switch over to Miami. Miami-Dade, I'll open it up. Last 10 weeks. All right, 810 active single family hit the market. We had 199, 144 under contract pending with 258 closed. We had 260 last month. Real solid number for Miami-Dade single family. 99 cancels is pretty consistent with what we've had over the past 10 weeks. We come on down to condos. I'll open it up again. All right, condos, 810 active, a little less than the last 10 weeks coming on the market. 144 of those went under contract. That's actually the most we've had in 10 weeks. Let's see, closings, 258 closings, largest we've had in 10 weeks.
That's huge.
And yep, and 99, only 99 canceled, which the expired cancel rate is the lowest it was in the last 10 weeks. So when you see those numbers, Rick, what does that tell you again?
Well, back to, for me, if I'm sitting in your shoes, I'm thinking, okay, the market's improved, week over week and the strongest we've seen in 10 weeks. Where's your business coming from? Are you getting your unfair share? And do each of these sectors, represent a target area that you're taking advantage of? Because not all markets are created equal, and that's part of the conversation today in the articles that you've brought to the table for us to discuss.
Love it. Love it. All right, let's go on down to Palm Beach and finish it up. I'll open it up again. Palm Beach, single family, 849 hit the market, largest since the early March. 260 under contract, again, largest since that first week in March, and 298 closing, a little less than the 330 and the 322 that we've had, but again, very consistent across the board. Maybe not as large and improved as the other two, but definitely consistent. 59 canceled, 50 expired. Overall, looks in good shape. Let's look at condos. All right. Condos, 756 hit the market, 180 closed. That's a very consistent number for them, and 49 for Palm Beach condos. All right, let me check the chat box, see if I missed anything. Doesn't look like anything but our AI note takers coming in. So the numbers are there. We saw Luke, he put in some scripts and dialogues for the numbers. We're going to jump right into the articles for today, and let me bring that up for us. All right, article number one, Rick. Housing market titled What 10 Years of Housing Data Reveals About the 2026 Market and Signals to Watch. So basically, this is the first article makes the point that the housing market doesn't turn all at once. And this is just giving perspective for everyone so we can get perspective to our clients. It always follows a pattern. And sellers, here's the pattern it says it does. Sellers push pricing, buyers follow for a while, buyers begin to push back. And when pricing behavior and buyer response fall out of sync, the market actually has to adjust. And that's where we're at right now with the tug and pull. That's not a collapsing market, it's more of a negotiating market that it goes in. And the article points out three things we should be watching at all times: pricing behavior, market response, and friction. So, in other words, where sellers wrong, are buyers actually following that? And where are deals starting to break? So the signal isn't price here, it says the gap between what sellers and want is what actually determines price. So Rick, what are top agents or what have you seen top agents doing when to get ahead of reality when sellers aren't realistic? What does that look like?
Well, I mean, the key element is recognizing the detriment in your competitive disadvantage. Like, where do you flaw? Who's going to win? I mean, it's a beauty contest every time you show up in the market. And so, who's got the advantage? Who's going to become the bridesmaid? Who gets married off? And who wins, basically? And the interesting thing is the winners are 68 days. It looked like the average days on market. Again, this is national news, so you have to be careful because every micro market has its own nuance. But, if 100 you're battling 68 or 121 days, not a substantive difference in time if you think about in the grand scheme of things, 60 additional days. But in that time, I think the risk as a listing agent is that your house becomes stigmatized or perceived flawed in some way, and buyer perception changes the longer your house is on the market or your condo or your product. And so I think that's where your conversations with your clients are so vital. It's like, where do you want to land and how soon do you want to land there? How much stress do you want to feel? And how important is timing for you? Because eventually everyone wins if the market corrects and shifts. But what they're saying here is that the market is negotiating and it's navigating buyers and seller perception where sellers obviously their goal is to perpetually raise price and push pricing where buyers want the best value possible, and where the gap shows up is in days on market. And that's what I pay attention to often too in my conversation, because one thing's for sure, it ultimately comes down to buyer confidence. And when people compete for houses, someone overpays, someone pays a premium. Fear of loss is a greater motivator. And so, how do you put yourself in position to win a beauty contest day one so that you're not stigmatized and that potentially competing offers show up? And your job gets easier too. You're not having to scramble to show them and illustrate value 6 months from now while you're still the best realtor in town, even though their house hasn't sold. So,
Yep.
yeah, this is an interesting reality. And I will say this in mixed markets, which is what it also implied that every market has its unique, narrative. Your value as a real estate professional goes up if you bring your A game and know what you're talking about and understand, the push and the pull of that tension it talks about.
Yep, we're going to talk a lot about that. Really good stuff. So it really leads into our next article, which is the power of leading with influence in real estate sales. And I believe this really matters right now. And it really talks about in the article, real estate sales are built on trust, not persuasion. And the old pressure-based approach, it talks about the evolution of the pressure-based approach, does not work in our environment. And that clients do not want to be pushed, they want to be guided. We talk a lot about this in negotiation classes, but the article's whole point is really that the best agents out there don't really sell at all. They more teach and they educate and they ask better questions. And Rick, we're going to get to that because you're a master question asker. And I think you've always been really good at that. But they help clients understand what decisions make the most sense. And by creating trust, you create movement easier, is what the article says. So it all points out to the big issue at the end. which is another point that I'd love to talk about, which is the not good enough mindset, the self-doubt, where a lot of agents hesitate because they're too focused on whether they are good enough instead of whether they are helping enough. And I love that article because people don't follow pressure, they actually follow clarity. So, Rick, where do you see agents lose trust the most during a real estate transaction?
Man, that's a big question. And by the way, when you said, Rick, you're the best question asker in the, and I'm like, my first thought was, well, am I? So I wanted to answer that with a question. And the answer is probably at times, and we all have moments where we feel like we need to press on somebody and push people. But I'll just start with this. People resist when pushed upon. And I find every time I start to try to, I guess, exhibit leverage in something that seemed rhetorical and obvious, no matter truth or not, it's a human thing to resist. And so, to your point, the greatest gift on the planet is to become a masterful communicator through questions and to listen more than you talk. The article does speak to confidence. And I remember early on in my career realizing the less I talked, the less likely it was that I would say something stupid or, or misaligned. Let's not say stupid, misaligned with what my clients' goals were. And so, instead of assuming they understood what was going on in the market or understood the mechanics of a loan or understood how inspections and negotiations around repairs work, or I would ask them, what's been your experience in real estate? What was your last real estate agent like? What did you love about them? What didn't you love? And then I would adopt my response to their experience and their reality. And if they love something about that person and that experience, by golly, I was really good and that's how I operate. If they really hated open houses and how they approached something or they fill in the blank, I would never be, yeah, I'm surprised someone would behave that way, and it sounds silly, but if you're newer to the business, the secret is to ask questions and let them feed you what I used to call layups. Like they'll tell you what they want if you get to the core of the question. And there's a book called the QBQ, and it's the question behind the question is what that acronym stood for. And it's truth always lives three or four questions deep, not the first rhetorical, like the first surface question. In other words, if you ask a key question about their motivation and their direction and what their lifestyle looks like in the next season of life, don't let them just give you one answer and get away with that. Say, well, go deeper, tell me more. And what would it be like? And what would you feel like waking up there and feeling this experience or in that community? Or can you imagine your kids in high school and these are, they're grade school now or, and I don't know, that's just where trust is the cornerstone of everything, but likability is job one. And the most likable people on the planet that I know are more interested in me than themselves. And that's a rare trait in the world today. And so again, I'm going fundamentals at the hardcorest level, but likability is critical. And that just means also having more conversations because you can't solve a problem in someone's life without opening up that box and giving them an opportunity to express candidly and authentically.
So good, Rick. So good. I love that. Mark, you raised your hand. Love it.
Yeah, so just to follow up with you on that, Rick. Now, someone who's fairly newer to the industry, how would you recommend starting to learn those types of questions to ask? Or maybe even, is there a sheet that you started off with? Maybe like just coming to the office when I come in, having the sheet of questions that I just read to myself. So eventually they just become muscle memory at a point.
Yeah. There are a few things that I think I did well. One, I hired a mentor early on who was a coach of sort, and he allowed me to shadow him in his consultations. And the way a pro consults with someone is often very different than someone new who's kind of guessing what to say and do next. And he also taught me that having a scripted conversation around a listing appointment or even a buyer consultation, I would overinvest on the front end long before I jumped in a car and started showing property or trying to show them that I was, king of the listing world in their world. And so a lot of it was shadowing and there's R&D, rip off and deploy. I would just borrow from other people's experiences. The other thing, Mark, I invested in was some classes around what's called neurolinguistics. I don't know if you've ever heard of NLP, but there's a million today because of technology, man. It used to be you'd have to fly to California for a special class. Now there's videos on YouTube and, 15, 20 minutes a day. Invest in the people, learning how to navigate the people puzzle, and then learn real estate as fast as you can so that the data and your context of the conversation is supported. but neurolinguistics is a big deal. How you make eye contact, the way you lean in, the way there's little things or big things when it comes to the human experience, because there's all five senses at play, not just what they hear, because people only hear a small fraction of what you say. They're going to feel you long before. I'll add one more thing that I did early on that took me off the hook and took some pressure away in a meeting with someone that maybe I was a little intimidated by or uncertain. I was quick to say, hey, listen, I'm not necessarily the most experienced guy on the block, but here's what I promise. I know what I know, I know what I don't know, and I won't confuse the two. And I have an amazing arsenal of experts in the back office that I can lean in, whether it's legal, title, you know, surveys, soils engineering. I've got an amazing arsenal of experts that anything that's outside my boundary, we're going to consult with pros and make sure we get the best answer. And that just made it easy on me to be me. And then I think they respected that I was just, transparent. And but what I bring is amazing energy, tenacity, and the capacity to navigate difficult waters when things get emotionally charged. Is that something that sounds helpful to you? And by the way, that's a neurolinguistics trick right there. Is that
We're,
something that you'd appreciate having in the relationship? And then do this, and
we're all shaking our head with you, Rick.
they can't not do it. Like I'm just so hopefully that helped, Mark. But it's a skill and it's a muscle, and you have to build it, and it's practiced. And that fake it till you make it thing sounds cool, but honestly, I lived in a more. I don't think you want to reveal, all of your inadequacies or weak or vulnerabilities, but at the same time, people appreciate honesty, integrity, and hard work, and you'll win if you show up every day because most people don't show up.
For sure. So I guess thank you for that. I appreciate it, Rick. My question's more a little bit geared towards not necessarily newer in the industry, but newer in practicing my communication skills and specifically in asking questions. Just not, I agree with you. NLP classes, I'm focusing on exactly what to say. I'm doing my best in all that
Yeah.
regard and using my resources, leveraging that, making sure people know I'm leveraging that, that it's available to them. But just one simple takeaway that I can say every morning, I'm going to be reading off really just a sheet of questions. That's what I want to have of
Huh.
these phrases that I can just make a small change in my schedule and then have that compound over time.
So
I
I'm
can,
not sure I fully understand. I mean, my thought is this: if first step is to recognize that there's only so many areas of life people talk about. So I don't know if you've heard the acronym FORD, FORD, family, organization or work, recreation and activities, hobbies, and then dreams. So those are the kind of the big four buckets. If you met somebody, you might lean into and go, so tell me a little bit about you. What's going on in your family, organization? What do you do for a living? What sort of, schooling? Where did you grow? What's your origin story is kind of a fun question in 3 minutes or less. I mean, where'd you come from? How'd you get here? Because you're clearly doing really well, and I'm impressed. And anyway, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I think whatever anyone says, instead of just accepting that, it's a habit to be on your toes to go, tell me more, or and if elaborate, or can you give me an example of that, or when did that show up, or how did you develop that perspective, and it's those are questions people don't normally ask. So I can't give you like a set. I'm not that scripted, but my script is to keep looking for the next best question so that they realize that I'm sincerely intrigued by who they are, what they are, and why they are. Does that
Being
make sense?
curious. I guess that's just to sum it up. Being
Curiosity is the
curious.
key,
Yeah.
and that
I
takes
actually, I
patience.
actually think though, Rick, one thing that I've done for over 7 years now is just get up in the morning and make it part of your habits to write down 10 questions, Mark. And those 10 questions can literally be about things you're doing in the real estate space, objections you came about, what you're reading, anything. But it puts you in a mindset of asking questions and being curious. And you have to actually train that habit because everything in us is wanting to talk and talk and talk. And that gets us in the mindset of curiosity, which I think you're trying to get more to, Mark, and
Yeah,
get better at.
exactly.
So a skill set as simple as it is, and that compounds over time. In a month, you've written hundreds of questions. You'll be better than 99% of people within 1 month. So
Yeah.
that would just be a little tidbit, easy way to just get a habit formation going besides some of the books, if that makes sense.
I got one more idea that
Mhm.
just hit me because every day I'm in Chat GPT or Claude every day, and I'm letting it ask me like it almost prompts me to ask the next question because you'll ask a question, it'll give you the answer, and they'll go, "Would you like me to dig deeper about this, this, or this? And what if I clarified that? And could you clarify so I can give you a better answer?" I bet you could say, I am here I am in life, my age, my typical prototype client or my sphere of influence. If I were to lean in and ask compelling questions today about things going on in the world, give me 5 great areas to consider. It's so easy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna get to our last
And can I
article.
add one more thing real quick? Those that have been at this for a
As
long
you ask
time,
the
here's what
question.
I run the risk of. I find myself doing is falling prey to my own habits. And so some of this may be like, oh, that's rhetorical. Sure, I know that. Yeah, I do that. But take a deep breath and realize what you did may not be as effective as what you could do, no matter where you are. And the other thing I want to reinforce is that if you're 10% better, might create a 100% improved return when all you need is 1 or 2 additional clients inside the next 30, 45 days. So just,
Love it.
yeah.
All right, article number three. It's my move up moment, which is basically raising your hand to lead. So the third article really gets into your identity and about your identity. And the author makes the point that for a long time, he thought it's a very successful owner and real estate owner, thought production would create confidence and authority, but in reality, it actually didn't for him. He actually realized that being productive was kind of a process, but he was not really leading. And by leading, he's considered that a big distinction in the industry. He says that the difference wasn't production or experience, it was actually the posture. And he talks a lot about the most influential agents just don't close deals. If we're looking at influential, they shape conversations, which is kind of the icing on the cake on this whole conversation today. But leadership right now, he says, is not actually about being louder. It's about being or not about branding harder. It's about being grounded, useful, accountable, and willing to raise your hand, a problem solver. So the article really asks, and what I love about our KW family here is that the article talks about questions are you asking yourself and are you becoming a leader? And he says, are you mentoring agents? Are you going to ongoing training? Are you in a professional community? Are you raising your standards? And production doesn't create authority, leadership does. So Rick, what's stepping into leadership in a real estate agent's world actually look like? What's a practical way someone could do that in a KW office?
I mean, I would argue that we're all leaders. Somebody's I got somebody busting through. So at the end of the day, I mean, John Maxwell says that, leadership is defined as influence. And I think we all have tremendous capacity to influence people positively. And so to think, am I a leader? Am I not? I think we're all leaders and I think we're all influencers. And the question is, how do you maximize that? And I do want to add something, Mark. I have an idea for you. 6 months from now, you should put in your calendar that you're going to teach a class on how to ask incredible questions that lead to strong relationships and build client trust and conversion. Or, there's a twist in that narrative. Because if you really want to learn something, I figured out early on too that if I commit to teach it, I take a different approach to how I look at that topic or area. So even leadership, like if you're like, I want to become a leader, commit to being a leader and then fill in the blank and then teach it or show it or illustrate it. Or if you want to become a stronger producer, commit to mentorship and helping someone who's coming up in the business because I promise you'll realize some of the basics that you used to do and took for granted, you've kind of slipped or, you're not as aligned as you used to be in some of the blocking and tackling that really does matter. So,
Spot on.
yeah. And, the Lanyap, I don't know. The other thing is, I meant to say this earlier too. Whenever you're in a client relationship, everyone wants to buy, no one wants to be sold. And Kay Evans, our regional director, taught me Lanyap. It's a term. Anybody know the term Lanyap? Show of hands. Awesome. It's a cool French word that means a little extra. Anybody been to New Orleans before and had beignets? You order a dozen, you get 13. The 13th would be your lagniappe. And so I adopted this strategy in my relationships and in the transaction to always unequivocally deliver something they didn't expect throughout the process, either negotiating or potentially, whether it was just a thoughtful thing to show up when no one else probably would that way, or do something or say something extra and create a moment that they might want to share with a friend, a client, a coworker. And so as you work through this market, what can you do that creates memorable experiences that show and illustrate, amazing, loving, sincere effort on your part that they can't wait to share? And to me, when you talk about leadership and influence, that's the key. There's that silly song, "Give them something to talk about." Are you giving them something to talk about, or are you checking boxes and waiting for closings? Just a thought there. And I don't know
Really.
if I exactly answered the question relative to this article. Feed me some more, Matt.
No, that's fantastic. So I just summarize and then I got one last thing for the group. So I think Article 1 gets into the markets just negotiating. That's what we kind of figured out together. Trust. Now, Article 2 is trust is how you win. And number 3 is how leadership can separate you. And stepping up to leadership can take you to the next level. But this item of trust, it just reminded me as you were talking through. I know that's a little blurry probably, but if you haven't heard of the trust triangle, the trust triangle is something that you can just quickly visualize as how am I making sure that someone does or does not trust me? And the top of the trust triangle is authenticity. If you can't read it because it's blurry, that spells authenticity. I'm sorry, it's blurry. Number on the left side, this is logic, and on the right side is empathy. And it's something that I've always thought about. Like, I think you have to have trust in any relationship. Rick talked a lot about people liking you, and likability is a huge part. So authenticity at the top of the trust triangle means I experience the real you. So I think in this world, that authenticity word is more important than ever, both in social media, but both in life. But if I experience the real you, back to Rick's questions, I ask 2 or 3 questions deep, right? We walk through a lobby and see some of our best friends and ask how you're doing, and then we just walk away. When's the last time somebody said, "How are you doing?" and asked a couple questions deeper? Authentically, that feels like a real person who really cares about me. The part on the left is the logic. That's why you're here. I know you can do it. I know you use data to back up you can do it, and you use real quantifiable things that tell me what's going on in the market. And then the empathy side, which is the third part of the triangle, is I believe you care about me more than my successes. And if empathy, authenticity, and logic show up on your listing appointments and your relationships, I believe 100% you will win more business and have more influence. Rick, would you agree or disagree? Just looking for a little model. Mark got me on the model game there of how do we make this simple? But
Yeah.
authenticity, logic, and empathy, easiest way to gain trust as quickly as possible.
100%. And that, the other reminder today is just it's a numbers game. The more conversations you have, the more opportunities will show up. And so if every day, to Mark's point, you wake up and like, I want to compel people to see me differently. I want to compel people to recognize my sincere interest in them over my own. That means talking about things that aren't real estate related. But no matter what, quality in the quantity. And so the 3 steps I heard in this were: one, connect with more people, and then the nature of practiced, experience or gauged experience over time pay dividends. The other is teach and illustrate whenever you expose an opportunity. Instead of, there's a saying, prescription without proper diagnosis is malpractice. Prescription without proper diagnosis is malpractice. And so don't start trying to tell people what they need or want until you've clearly had them voice their own truth. And so there's a questioning connection part, there's a teach and illustrate part, and the last is, which goes back to becoming the quintessential pro in your business, is have evidence and stories that are real-time stories about how your knowledge and your experience and your heart and expertise paid huge dividends for your clients. And that becomes irrefutable and undeniable. You link those together and you're going to build bonds that are unbelievable. And then the law of reciprocity kicks in because people want to share good news. And you pour into people in a disproportionate manner every single day, they're going to wake up wanting to reciprocate. That's just what good people do. And it's not easy to, make $1 million a year in real estate, but it's not complicated. there's an algorithm and a formula for that. And if it's been done before, it can be done again. And back to the point earlier with Mark, I had role models that I'm like, if I do what they do with the same level of intentionality, head and heart combined and connect with people in meaningful ways, I can have what they have. And I'm here to tell you, it's all fact. The MREA book is an operations manual for how to do it. It's not a novel and not a one-time read.
Love it. Thank you, Rick Hill. Every bit of this from today and the articles are in Circle with scripts and social media scripts and newsletter header that you can use in your business. Thank you for investing in yourself today. Go make it a great week. Thank you for your time.
We love you
Thanks,
guys.
y'all.
Thank you.